Hello everyone, so this is just a quick message before the video actually comes. I've completed the video now and edited it, and what it does look in a few places like it's a little bit rushed, and that's because it was. From the time I got my son to film it for me to the time we had to stop work, I only had about an hour and a half to do the whole video. We're in a residential area and we can't work at the weekends past a certain time. So it was a video that I really wanted to do, and I think my son has done a really good job of filming it for me. Had I had to film it on my own, I don't think I would have been able to do it, and it was a video that I wanted to do. So it is half an hour, 30 minutes, which is a long slog for a YouTube video, which I understand, but I didn't want to split it up into smaller videos because I think it's better to just be all in one go. So here it comes, and I hope you find it of interest. Hello everyone, so in today's video I'm back on a bungalow. I put the roof trusses on yesterday, and basically what this bungalow has, it's got a run of trusses that go in one direction, and then it's got another run of trusses that go at 90 degrees to that. Now what we do to join these two roofs together is we have to put a piece of ridge board through, and then what that does is it forms two valleys. Now there's different ways of forming the valleys. If this was a more habitable space, so if it had a room in it, these valleys would be formed with a valley rafter, but in this case where everything is above ceiling line, these two roofs will intersect together using lay boards. So what I'm going to show you quickly today, and this is a perfect roof to show you this because it's quite small, and this would be typical even if the roof was much bigger, and this is how I'm going to join this roof into this one using a ridge and lay boards. So the first thing that we've got to do is put our ridge through from this roof into this one. So I've got my piece of ridge board here, which is 146 by 46, and what I need to do is temporarily support it on this roof here. Now what I've done is I've split, and if you come in here, this is the centre point of this roof. I've come half of the thickness of my 46mm ridge either side and put a line there just to help me. Now again, because I'm working on my own, I put a little piece of timber in here, which then this ridge board will just sit on. So what we need to do now is put a level on top of here to get a level line onto this roof. Right, so I'm going to put my ridge on and simply rest it on the tab that I've put on, and if you note that this part of the ridge here is in the same line as this part of the roof, because that is the plane of the roof. We don't want to bring it up so that this is level with the top, because then this shoulder would be wrong. So what I'm going to do here, and we're quite fortunate in this instance that this truss here is not a million miles off the line with here. So we can just put that piece of ridge board on, hold it tight to this truss here, and then simply put our level on. I'm going to grab my pencil and just bring that up until this reads level, and then we can put a mark here, and then that will be the top level mark of our ridge. So now what I'm going to do, we need something to put this ridge board on, so what I'm going to do is cut possibly 1 or 2 noggins in here, and then the only other job I've got to do is take the seat cut of this roof and put it on this ridge, and then we can fit that ridge in. Okay, so we've got our ridge, and now what we've got to do is cut this seat cut to lay it onto these 2 noggins I put on. Now this cut, we know this is level, so basically this cut would be the seat cut of this roof. So what we're going to do to find that, I mean, I know what the pitch of this roof is, but let's say I didn't. What I'm going to do is get my level, and I'm simply going to level a line onto this rafter cord here, and then whatever roofing square you have, be it an adjustable one or a framing square with a fence on it, or just sliding bevels like I used for many years, you just set it now to this angle here, and then we can run that onto the ridge. So the square that I use, it's my bit of my go-to square, is this 12-inch Stanley adjustable roofing square. I find it a great bit of kit, and for some reason in their infinite wisdom, Stanley don't make this square anymore. But anyway, it's a fantastic bit of kit. It's got an edge that you mark your seat cuts along and an edge that you mark your plumb cuts along. So what I'm going to do in this instance, I'm just going to set the bit that says mark seat cuts along this edge. So I simply line that up with my seat cut, which is there, and then a simple case of locking off this thumb screw, and now I've got my seat cut set. So now we can transfer this mark onto our ridge, cut it, and then we can fit the ridge. Right, so we're almost ready to cut our ridge. We've got our seat cut, we've put our noggins in here, and so what we need to do now is go back to the level mark that we put on earlier, which if you see is just here. So we said that this was slightly offset to the center point of the ridge, so I've just pulled that line across a little bit. So now what we need to do is we need to measure between this mark here and across to here, and that will give us the measurement of our ridge. So I'll just do that. It's going to be easier for me, and again, if this was a bigger ridge I would have to have someone to help me, but in this case it's quite easy. So I put my tape on the mark that end, and then I can simply measure it off to this end, and in this case it's absolutely bang on 1.9 meters. Right, so this is our bit of ridge. I've got a nice square cut that end, so I'll pull it down and we've got a 1.9 meter mark here. So now we need to put our seat cut on. Now, one of the limitations of this square is that on really slight seat cuts like this, it doesn't actually reach all the way through the timber. So what I'm going to do in this instance is just get my short level and run that up the side of the square until it reaches my 1.9 mark, and then I can just literally, as long as that's all nice and square to the guide here, I can then just run that mark straight through there. Now I can cut this piece off here. Right, okay, ridge is up. Now sit it on the piece of timber that I put on there, and I know we haven't got it lined up exactly with the roof yet, but we'll do that shortly. So as we can see, we've got a fairly nice cut down onto these noggins. So the next thing that we have to do, let's just check this for level, always make sure. Perfect, so that's absolutely brilliant. So the next thing we've got to do is fix this ridge. We know it's level. Now what we've got to do is make sure that it runs in line with this roof, so that when it comes all the way through, it's nice and straight. So what I'll do is basically I'll lie it down through here, and then I'll straighten the ridge up and I'll put a tack in it, and then we'll get on to the lay boards. Right, I've just eyed that through, and actually it's pretty good where it is. So what I'm going to do is just put one tack in the top. I don't want to go mad nailing at this point, just in case there's a problem and I need to unpick anything. So next we're going to have a look at the lay boards. Right, so now it's time to have a think about cutting this lay board. Now this lay board's long enough that basically what I've done is I've put it onto this roof, and I've slid it down the roof until it's hit the top of this truss here and the corner of our ridge here. Now what basically that's done is the underside of this lay board is now in the same plane as the pitch of this roof. So what we can accurately do now is we can run a level or a straight edge, and this is the quickest and easiest way I find of marking out your lay boards. There is a technical way of doing it, but by the time you've taken all the measurements and levels and set it up, it's as quick to do it this way. So I run my level up the side, or a straight edge up the side of the ridge, and you must make sure that your ridge is plumb. So then I run the level up the side of the ridge, and then I can just spy that line down onto that lay board, and that will be accurate. So the level goes up the side of the ridge there onto the lay board, and then I transfer that mark across. Now the only other thing I need to do is take a measurement from the overall length of the lay board, which will be from here down to the trusses at the bottom, and then the cut that goes on the bottom of the lay board will simply be 90 degrees from this cut. And now what I can do is I run my tape measure up to the ridge, and then this doesn't have to be an exact measurement, because the first rafter will be a certain way up the layboard. So I think what I'm going to do in this instance is make it so it just catches the bottom of this truss here. So I'm going to call that 2650. I've cut the top line of the layboard, and what I'm going to do is just use my adjustable square. I've set the seat cut to this line here, so when I come down to the other end, it's just a simple case. That's my measurement. I just put it on and mark that through, and that'll give me the square cut to the top cut. So we'll cut that. Right, so let's stick that up and see what it looks like. May need a little bit of adjustment. We may have got it right the first time. So yeah, I think that's great. I think we're pretty much spot on there. So what we've got now is this layboard, the outer edge of this layboard and the top outer edge of that ridge board, they are the exact plane of this roof. So if I take the camera, when we look through this plane of this roof, as I bring the camera down, you'll see it comes into the plane of the roof. I hope you can see that. And that is the plane of the roof that all of our rafters will now fix to, and that will make that roof lovely and flat. Perfect. So what I'm going to do now is basically use that layboard there as a template and simply copy it onto the other layboard and get those fixed, and then the last job there is to cut in some jack rafters. So when I cut those two noggins initially in the top there to take the top of the ridge layboard that I've been provided with, I thought they'd be long enough for me to be able to take the noggin off the end. Well, it turns out that it wasn't. So unfortunately this layboard is going to be slightly short, but it doesn't actually matter because the layboard doesn't have to come right down to the adjoining roof. It only has to be long enough to take the first jack rafter. So what I've done in this instance, because this layboard is slightly short and there's no truss for it to sit on, what I've done is put a noggin in here to take the bottom of the layboard. Now what I'll do is I'll show you how I line up the bottom of this layboard in this instance. So we're going to put the layboard in so it's right at the top. So what I'll do is put my layboard in so that it's in the right position at the top. Same as the other side. The top side of this layboard wants to run exactly with this outside edge of this ridge here, and then that becomes the correct plane of the roof. So now I've got this layboard intersecting correctly with the ridge. What I'm going to do is just pop one nail in. You don't want to go mad, and then I'll come down and show you how I line up the bottom of the layboard. As I said, this layboard doesn't come right down to this truss. It doesn't actually have to, because the first jack raft will be up here somewhere. But what we've got to do now is line this edge of the layboard up with this plane of the roof. And what I'll do here is simply push my level across. So as we can see here, look, the level is nice in the plane of this roof. And then all I've got to do, without getting in the way of the camera, is pull that layboard up until it hits that spot. So again, now we know that this edge of this layboard is perfectly in the plane of this roof. And then, without my ear defenders on, again, I'll just put a tack in that. And you put the level through. Look at that, absolutely perfect. If you see between here and here, that lines in absolutely perfectly, look. So again, what we've got there is we've now got the ridge and both of these lay boards in the perfect plane of this roof. So now these two roofs intersect, and when we cut these jack rafters in, they'll all be in the same plane, and that will join this roof to that roof, forming our valleys. So the last and simplest job really, and potentially the most satisfying, is to mark out and cut the jack rafters. So what we need to do now is set out for our jack rafters, and this girder truss here I know is dead plumb because I plumbed it in when I put it on. So all we're simply going to do is carry on our 600 centres through, which isn't many in this instance, and we're going to use this outside girder truss as our measuring point. So what I'm simply going to do, and I keep my measurements on the down side, so it's always to the longest point. I'll show you that when we go down to the bottom. So I just hook my tape over this outside truss of this triple, and then we carry on our centres, which in this case is 600mm. So 600, and then we go that way because that's on that side of the line, and then we go 1200 again and that way. So what I'll do with those lines now is just square them across, square them down, and I'll do the same on the other side. Mark both of these at the same time. Now when it comes to marking the bottom, I know that this girder truss is upright, so again simply what I do is hook my tape over the outside edge of this outside truss. I know that there's a tiny gap here, usually there isn't, but you know, if you can't hook it in, you just hold it in, and then I measure across my 600s and mark it onto this edge of the lay board. And then, as I said, because I always mark to the lowest edge, so this is always the longest point, so again we know that this is straight and upright, so we can use that as our measuring point. Again, here we go, 1.2 metres, which is the next 600 there. And then we know there are points. So now what we've got for our jack rafters is we've got our two fixed points. So we simply, and I know this regularised timber is absolutely fantastic, but the only sort of, I wouldn't call it a downside, it's not a downside if you don't want splinters, but is you haven't got an exact point to measure to. When you look at this timber here that the truss is made of, it's got a lovely square edge. So we do have to sort of, I'm not to say we guess it, but we definitely sort of have to have a bit of interpretation as to where the edge is with this kind of timber. But let's go somewhere in the middle there. So I hold that on the lay board mark there, and on my ridge board mark here, and I'm going to call that 669. So what I'm going to do there is just put a little measurement there, and that 669 is from the longest point to the longest point, and I'll do the same on this lower one. Now fortunately again I can reach this. If this was a much bigger infill, I would obviously have to have a hand from somebody. So again, hold that on the lay board mark, and then up to the ridge, and we're going to call that, again, we're going to call that 1318. Now what's interesting now is that if this is dead straight and everything square as it should be, the measurements on the other side to the lay board should be exactly the same. So let's have a look and see. So same as we did on the other side there. I've got my 600 mark here, longest point, and then cross up the roof. And then the same, 1200 is here. And that's the longest point, cross up the roof. Now let's have a look, see how square we are or how good the trusses are. So I'm going to drop my tape onto that one there, and we have got, oh, I'll have that 13, 17, maybe a millimetre difference. This one will tell more because it's shorter. So this one is here, what we got there, 665, I can't remember what we had there, 669, so yeah, pretty much. That's not bad. So that, when I eyed this ridge through, obviously these trusses are good enough, and as I eyed it through, I could obviously get it straight. Measurements are great and levels are great, but sometimes you do just have to let your eye be your guide. Right, so we're going to cut these jack rafters now, and basically I was always used to be a little bit daunted by jack rafters, but the reality is it's just a rafter that's got a slightly different cut on the bottom. So the first thing we need to do is find the pitch of this roof. Now I know what the pitch of this roof is, but let's pretend we don't. So what I'm going to do is simply get my level again, and I'm going to physically mark the plumb line on this roof. Now again, the reason for doing this is with the best will in the world, let's say that these plates are slightly out of level, the pitch of this roof would then slightly alter and your cuts would be out. So sticking a level on it is really the best way to get it most accurate. So then what I do, got my roofing square again, and we're going to set it on the plumb. This is the plumb line. So I literally simply put that onto that plumb line we've just measured, tighten off the screw, and that is now set. So that square now gives us the plumb cut along this edge and the seat cut along that edge. So these jack rafters, all we literally do is we put a plumb cut on this end and a seat cut on this end. Now what I'm going to do, just by way of explanation and just to try and demystify it a little bit, because I know it can be daunting for people, is what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a flat seat cut on the bottom of here, put it back on the roof, and then show you the compound part of the jack cut. So 13, 18. And I'm going to cut this square and then put it back on the roof just to show you. Right. Let's see if we can make this saw sweat a bit more, shall we? Quite a big cut for this little saw. Right, we'll take this jack cut up onto the roof. Now, what you can see here is we've got a seat cut, which is the seat cut of this roof, because it's in a flat plane here. Don't let this pitching up put you off. So we've got a seat cut and a plumb cut. Our plumb cut fits nicely against the ridge, and our seat cut, you see our longest measurement here, our seat cut fits nicely along this lay board. Now the issue is that we've got a flat cut here, so we want to cut the bottom of this rafter so it sits nicely on this lay board. Now what we've got to do that is basically put a compound cut on this seat cut. Now what's really simple here is all we now do is we find the pitch of this roof and we set the circular saw to that pitch, and we basically make this cut with the saw set to this pitch, and that'll give us that lovely seat cut. The pitch of the roof that we're cutting into is 23 degrees. So if we look at the saw here, we just literally, I've got a back guide on this one, we bring it round until it reads, so that's 15, 20, we've got 25 there, so let's just go just closer, got to judge that, 23 degrees. Now all we do is run the saw through that seat cut, set like this, and that will give us the compound part of the seat cut. Right, hopefully this is going to look all right. I know that I've already cut this once. Let's have a look, see if I can find it. I can't even see it. So now we have a 23, although this isn't 23 degrees because it's cut along the seat cut, the saw was set to 23 degrees, so now this should fit perfectly on that label. Let's have a look. Now, when we put the plumb cut at the top, when we roll that down, look at that. Absolutely lovely. So we've now got that seat cut, but it's also got the raking cut of this roof. So now we can just do that with the other rafters and pretty much get them nailed in. So now we're nailing this in, all we need to do is make sure that this jack rafter runs in with the line of this lay board.
we put a pin in the top, and the same at the top here, that the rafter runs in line with the ridge. We put a pin in here. We don't want to nail this too hard in this at this point, because what we don't want to end up doing is bowing the ridge. So what I'll do now is I'll cut the other one and fix that, and then move on to the last pair. Now it's really important that it can get a bit confusing and you can get a bit lost, but I put these marks on the lower side of the rafter onto the layboard, and then that way when you're cutting, you're always cutting to the longest point all the time. It's easier. So again, what's really important here is, now we're doing the opposite of that one. I've put my seat cut on the bottom of my jack rafter, but I've got to make sure that the point is going the right way. So in this case, it's the opposite of that one. So it's just one of those things, and it's caught me out many, many times, as I suspect it has many other people. You just have to make sure that you cut with it, the angle going the right way. So that's now, again, as we said, that's our longest point. So I think the measurement was 13, 17. So again, longest point to longest point. We come 13, 17. That's the longest point at our ridge. So we simply have our plumb cut on there, and then we can cut that on a square cut. It's rubbish, isn't it? Yeah, and now we can simply go around the other side and fix it. So again, we go to our ridge at the top and get this edge to the edge of the layboard, nice and flush with the ridge at the top and the layboard at the bottom, and we'll just put one pin in for a minute. Same at the top. That's it. Just this last pair to cut, and then we can fix the whole lot. Right, so now we'll just put that last pair in, exactly the same as the others. We've got our marks on the ridge, marks on the layboard. We just slide it up until it's this top of this jack rafter is lining in with this layboard. Put a little pin in it. Same in the ridge. Same on the other side. As you see, the top line of this jack rafter lines in perfectly with the layboard, because as I said earlier, the layboard represents the plane of the adjoining roof. Put a pin in and one in the top. Now, I'm happy with that. It all looks great. So what I'm now going to do is nail the whole thing up. Right, so that's it. Hopefully I've done a reasonable job of explaining to you what I'm doing. I've been doing these kind of roofs for over 30 years and never really felt the need to explain it to anybody. So I hope that it may have been interesting or helpful. I always really enjoy doing these kind of little things. I get great satisfaction out of them. I'd say in terms of roofing, roofing progression, I'd say, and if you saw in one of my other videos, I did a small mono truss roof. That would be sort of a starting point for roofing. Then perhaps you'd move up to a roof, you know, not dissimilar to this, would be roof trusses, gable end to gable end. And then I suspect the next progression from that would be a gable end to gable end hand cut roof. And then I think once you go beyond that, you start to get into the realms of what we're doing here, which is forming valleys using layboards, and then moving on from that would be full hand cut roofs. Roofing something that I've always really enjoyed, and I wouldn't say I'm the best roofer in the world, but there's no roof that I haven't been able to tackle so far. And as with everything in carpentry, realistically, you never stop learning. So anyway, that's us done. I'm very lucky today that my son has come out and held the camera for me, so hopefully we've got some good footage and you've enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. All of these trusses are all in the line of the roof, as is our jack, as is our layboard. So now we've got a lovely flat plane from this roof into that roof.